we go. Interesting. Bear with me because I'm trying to record this and I'm hitting the record. It looks like it's recording, but usually I get a little indicator that it's recording, unless they've upgraded Zoom now, which they could have.
The recording is showing the icon.
Recording.
Yes, sorry.
It is? All right, good. All right. All right, so everyone please put yourself on mute. You're gonna have plenty of opportunity to get off of mute and talk. So now that it's recording, I'll start over. So let me get out of this before I mess everything up. There we go. So like I said, we decided our community we'll talk about in a minute from now. I'll go through the history and origins. We kind of started out as a gateway to Agile. Then we moved to Enterprise Agile. We wanted to focus on large companies, complex organizations. You know, how do we do Agile in large companies and complex organizations, if you will. And that's kind of been our focus for the last year or so. So that's Enterprise Agile. Welcome everyone tonight. Tonight we're going to focus on the new edition or release of the Scrum Guide 2020. Hopefully some of you have read it and maybe attended some other discussions or sessions on it. I know Jeff Sutherland had one and a few others that discussed it, the co-authors. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to kind of go through the history of our group and introduce and thank everybody because we're at the end of the year. Then we're going to do a fun, we'll see how fun it is, Scrum Guide trivia, you know, kind of game. I'm going to have slides with questions. Gopal is going to help capture the results. And the first person to enter the correct answer into the chat window gets a point. We got 20 questions. The person who wins, I got a couple books to send. So maybe we'll do first, second, and third place. And we'll send some books out to y'all. Merry Christmas. And you won the game. So and then we're going to have a discussion on the Scrum Guide 2020. You know what some of the changes are and the rationale, and then open up for conversation because many of us here have experience with Scrum and the Scrum Guide changes, and then it'd be interesting to hear what everyone else thinks. So that's basically our agenda today. So just really quick, we started out calling ourselves Gateway to Agile, and we focused on, you know, what is Agile? We kind of positioned an argument, if you will, or a way of Agile. And we did this for the first couple of years where we did sessions every month and they kind of linked together and we tied together these things you see in front of you, which is Dark Agile, Agile Universe, Product Nebula, Tech Singularity, Enterprise. But those are the names we called it. But it's really about how to do high performing teams and happiness, Scrum and XP, design thinking, deconstructing the requirements, DevOps, test ops, and SecOps, and frameworks and enterprise agility. So we're kind of saying that all of these things together, you know, DevOps, design thinking, everything else, a couple of years ago when we did this was all part of the Agile experience and the Agile ecosystem. And we kind of called this, we got this from Integral Agile. I mean, this is nothing new. We kind of, you know, provided more detail around it and how to do it and how we synergize everything and basically create harmony across all these four sectors to do Agile well and organizational for a company to become an Agile enterprise. We discussed that. We spent a couple of years on all this stuff. Then we flipped in 2020, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ron and Gopal and others, the leaders on the team. And we said, well, let's focus on all this cool stuff, but some unique characteristics for large organizations at the enterprise Agile level and the complications and complexity therein. I want to thank our sponsor, our main sponsor here, which is Matrix. That's the company I work for. And they've been sponsoring us and, you know, basically funding us, minimal funding. But, you know, when we used to have meetings together before COVID, we would meet together inside offices and other places here in San Francisco. And a lot of, not just Matrix, but a lot of other companies did help provide space for us and funding for food and so forth. So I want to shout out to those. So those were several companies like Wells Fargo, Twitter, First Republic Bank, Matrix, and Moogsoft, and there were several others. And just want to say thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for the leaders. So these are the leaders of our group: Christine, Romero, Gopal, Ron, Andrew, and Piyush. And they basically make this happen and get people to talk and present and help organize and all that cool stuff. So thanks a lot. We have a lot of stuff out there. So 2020 is the year of Zoom. So we have a lot of Zoom recordings out there. We've had a lot of great sessions. These are some examples of the sessions we've had. They're available that you could go out there and look at them. I'll send this deck out. There's a link that's on this icon here that goes to the YouTube site. You can click on that, and they're there for your pleasure. We had some good, exciting stuff here. I mean, Gopal, Ron, do you want to mention any of these, or any color you want to say about some of the stuff we did this year?
Yeah, I can say a couple of sentences here. So, you know, a couple of points. One, as a group, we have almost doubled in 2020. So we are right now about 1,200 plus members, and that's one big milestone we were looking at in terms of how big of a reach and how many people, you know, we can share our ideas and thoughts and, you know, get questions from. So that's one thing that we achieved in 2020. The other thing, you know, a lot of great speakers. A couple of them I want to mention. One is, you know, Mary Poppendake, you know, came to us and did a presentation of 6 decades of software engineering, and it's in one of the recording. And for me personally, you know, when she actually did that 6 decades of her life and showed what she has gone through in the 6 decades, not just from her life, but overall in the industry, that was really inspiring. So that's one thing that I want to point out.
I think it's worth saying too, Gopal, that she and her husband literally wrote the book on Lean Agile. Two of them, maybe 3 of them, I'm not sure, but they wrote the books on it.
Yeah. And if you, of all these recordings, if you get just enough time to view one of them, I would definitely recommend that as one thing to view, or the first thing to view there.
Well, it would be well worth the Computer History Museum doing a repeat of that. It was so good. They tend to get audiences that are 5 times the size of ours, and it was so good. And I think it's also worth saying that, does somebody want to put the YouTube channel into the?
I will do that. I'll do that.
It's also worth saying that we've done a real span of choices for scaling Agile to the enterprise level, including the very radical scaling approach, Fast Agile, that we had a recent presentation on, in which organizations self-organize into teams every 2 days, and a pretty remarkable one. And then I'm not remembering all the ones that we've had, but boy, we've had some great talks, and we've got 2 talks coming up early on in I think both of these are in February on program management that I'm really excited about. One of them by Chris Sims, who was my own personal guru in getting into Agile almost 20 years ago. and one by Kevin Thompson, who may have championed some of you getting into Agile from his role at C Prime in the day, and he's left C Prime now, but has done some really seminal work on program management as well as on hardware Agile. Both of those are coming out, I believe, in February. I think Chris Sims is on the website now, and Jay's about to put the Kevin Thompson one up.
I just did it.
Oh my gosh. So they're both up there now, both in February, right?
I think Chris is in January. I'm not sure. I have to go look, but they're up there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Chris is January.
Great. Great. So we're going to have a 1-2 punch, January and February, program management. And both of them have some real insights into program management. So I'm really looking forward to both of those.
And then the just other person you may want to do is, how Agile and product management helps both. So Rich Mirnoff has been going around doing the whole product thing. He's one of the early leaders of this whole product management and product leadership and the product side of everything. So that was a good one too. And he's still out there talking and doing his thing. So I think all these are very good. I learned something from every one of them.
I'll throw one more out there, which is the tribal unity, which M. Campbell Pretty in her book Tribal Unity, but I discovered her book when she gave a talk in Seattle, and it turned around my up to that point very negative reaction to SAFe, and made me think that there could be human quality to SAFe. So some of you have that belief, I'm sure, but some of you have that skepticism, and just a great talk on teamwork at the tribe level.
And Diana Larson also did her great spiel on retrospectives and about, retrospectives aren't worth anything unless you have an action plan or something you're going to do about it. So it was very good. And I forgot the one who did the Jeopardy. Which one was the Jeopardy one? You all got to watch that.
Maria, I forgot her last name. Maria. OKRs, about OKRs.
Yeah, OKRs. Yeah,
that was really good. Yeah, Maria Brighter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to second the retrospectives session. We had a couple of efforts lately at my company that have gone a bit pear-shaped, and we found that I found that some of the ideas that I took away from the retrospectives session really helped to creatively not only identify but attack the problems. So
yeah,
I found that really helpful.
Yeah, and I'll probably try to get the owner of Retrium. He's a nice guy. I mean, that's all their tools. It's retrospectives. So maybe we'll get him to come and talk to, and that'll be good to supplant.
He's really good.
Yeah. But anyway, this is, you'll get access to this library, and we're going to keep adding to it. Even when we go back to normal, whenever that is next year, we're still thinking maybe even if we have stuff, we don't know how to do this yet, but if we have it in a space somewhere where we still may Zoom it or record it, because this is pretty cool that you can go to something if you couldn't make it and you're still part of the community, you have an opportunity to go and listen and learn. So that's kind of what we did in 2020. So what I propose to do, remember the agenda is we're going to do this game first. We're going to find a winner, maybe first, second, third place. Gopal's going to help. And then after that, I'm going to kind of go through the Scrum Guide 2020 and kind of talk about some of the differences. And then we can have an open chat of what do we think. So are y'all ready to play a game? Get your chat window open. Get ready. So the rules of the game are whoever puts in the right answer first and Gopal sees it, he's going to mark your name down. And you won that question. There's 20 questions. Some questions require some typing. It's not simple A, B, C, or D, or true or false. There's some words you got to put in there. I think I'm going to give everyone, what, about 2 minutes per question, maybe? Let's see how it goes. So what I did, we're going to test your knowledge of Scrum, and we're going to test your knowledge of the evolution of the Scrum Guide. So those who had the spare time to click on the links that I put in the meetup, there were 2 links in there, one by a couple people, and one of them kind of talked about the evolution of the Scrum Guide. That's the picture you see there. And the other company or group actually saved all the published Scrum Guides from the beginning. And you can go out and look at each one of them. And, you know, if you into it, you can see the differences. Well, some of these questions depend upon you doing that. So, and some of them are pretty easy questions if you know Scrum. Okay, is everyone ready? First question. Scrum Guide is older than the Agile Manifesto. True or false? I was going to get the Jeopardy jingle music, but then that wouldn't fit with Trivial Pursuit. I don't know what the music goes with Trivial Pursuit. I guess I could have found something. Gopal, did we get enough answers?
Yes, we did.
Cool.
And we have, oh, you want to, display the answer first before I say who the winner is?
Here's the answer. Who won?
Doug Levitt.
Cool, Doug. Good. Now I have another question in here that's a little different than this one. So the Scrum Guide first came out in 2010.
2010, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah. Now, next question. How many versions of the Scrum Guide have been published or released? I'm listening to Christmas music. That's why I'm doing this. We got enough answers, Gopal?
Yes, we do.
All right. The answer is 7.
I do have a clarification. So Bala Ganesh initially typed in 7, and then I assume he modified it to 6, and then Lindy came right behind and said 7. So I guess Lindy wins.
Yeah. Sorry about that. You had the right answer to begin with. It's a trick question because I'm not going to tell you because I have a question here that asks that. So I'm not going to tell you yet. All right. Next question. Who are the creators of the Scrum Guide? Y'all should know this. It's 2 people.
Wow, wow, we have some fast typists out there.
Yeah.
All right, so everyone knows this. It's Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland.
Doug is again the winner.
Excellent. I could tell you some stories about Jeff and Ken, but maybe I'll do that later. And some stories I probably shouldn't say anyway. All right. What are the roles in the first Scrum Guide in 2010. And we're going to talk about roles in the 2020 Scrum Guide. There is a minor change to the name of one of the roles. But in the first Scrum Guide, they had roles and they had names for them. What were they? The first Scrum Guide is pretty lengthy.
How long was the first Scrum Guide compared to the current one?
I think it was like 28 pages or something like that. The current one's like 13 or something.
Ooh, they've refactored.
Yeah. The current Scrum Guide is the shortest of all of them. Are you ready? Product owner, Scrum Master, and this is the tricky one. They called it the team. Did anyone get that, Gopal?
Yeah, Doug again got it right.
Oh, okay, cool.
Well, I'm going to give
Well,
it to him.
technically,
He
I
didn't
called
say
it-
the team. He just
I called
said-
it team, not the team.
Well, okay, well, we'll give it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was first with that answer.
Oh, we may not give it to you then. There's a debate on the floor. I'll have the judges decide.
No, he was the first with an answer, and he had the right answer.
All right,
Oh,
sorry.
I don't see Andy's answer.
No,
Ron.
what I said was Doug was the first with the answer, and he had the right answer. Not-
Oh, okay, good. All right, cool.
Sorry,
All right.
sorry if you sorry if I misspoke or you misheard.
Oh, okay.
Given two of you misheard, it definitely came out of my mouth wrong.
Believe it or not, I learned Scrum by reading Mountain Goat software back in 2000, I think, 2.
Oh, cool. That's before they printed Scrum Guide.
Mm-hmm.
All right, ready for the next question?
I believe on that same topic that Mountain Goat gave the first Scrum training.
Ah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, Mike Cohn did that.
Yeah.
He always brags he's like up to 6,000 or 7,000 people he's trained.
Wow.
All right, next. What is the percentage of time recommended for the team for sprint, for backlog grooming? Now, remember, we don't say grooming anymore, but it came out of the Scrum Guide 2010. It's a tip. So what's the percentage of time recommended for backlog grooming for a Scrum team? It was a tip in the first Scrum Guide.
Is it in the 2021?
2010.
No, but is it also in the 2021?
Yeah, the
No.
2020, no, they don't have anything prescriptive, Ron.
Yeah, they figure by now, if you don't know any of this stuff, too bad. We'll talk about that later. Did we get any right
Yeah,
answers?
we got a lot of answers. A lot of people got it right. The first person who got it right is Bala Ganesh.
Yeah, so it's 10%. That was the guidance at the time. And what reason why I'm going through all these Scrum Guide paths and talk about all this, because you'll be surprised how much of this sticks with people. So when I work with Agile coaches and stuff, and we talk about what we're going to do at a company and the practices we're going to implement and the guidelines and rules, you'll be surprised how much of this comes up all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've argued about story pointing defects or not. Defect story types. All right, ready for the next question? The first Scrum Guide was released through the Scrum Alliance in 2010. True or false? And anyone who follows the history of the Scrum Guide, and Ken and Jeff probably knows a little history behind this. So the answer is true. And this is about when Ken was a little bit like a year before, left Scrum Alliance. So Ken kind of started the Scrum Alliance. They parted ways with new leadership. And Ken left. He disagreed with how they're doing certifications and training and other things. And he left and he started his own company.
So we have a new winner, Ming Lam.
Cool. So if you go out there and you look at the first Scrum Guide that came out, the 2010 one, it's all Scrum Alliance and it's all been branded as such. After that, it's all branded by Jeff and Ken. There's no Scrum Alliance associated with it, if you noticed. Okay, ready for the next question? What are the Scrum events described in the Scrum Guide 2011? You should know these Scrum events by heart.
Are they different in the 2021?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, there is a difference. I'll talk about one in a minute. Let me know, Gopal, when you think we're ready. And you have to list them all, and they have to be correct.
Do they have to be in the right order?
No. It has to be in the order of the Scrum cadence in a 2-week sprint. No, I'm just kidding. You get extra point if it is.
They have to be correct whether to call it a daily Scrum or a daily stand-up.
Yeah, well, the 2011 one, they called them specific names.
I bet.
Are we ready, Gopal? Now, some of these we may not get a right answer, and that's okay. We're counting points by person, so it doesn't matter if no one gets it right.
All right, the closest, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So it was called the sprint planning, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. Now there's a difference. It's called the sprint. And the new one, it's called increment.
New one is called what?
Increment.
No.
Yay.
No, Sprint went away.
We'll go through sprint. We'll go through the current one after this. We'll bring it up and we'll go through it.
Oh, so it's increment, not iteration.
I think it's increment, but I could be wrong. But we'll go through it. My memory is not as good now that I'm ancient.
All right, so nobody has a clear full answer, but we have two people who are close. So David Freeman and Heather Roach are close.
Cool. So the reason why, go ahead.
And there was no stand-up or daily Scrum
No.
in 2011.
Yeah, that's why I brought this up, because this is what they kind of came up with at the time, and it's evolved over time, right? So every time we look at these different versions that were released, and you look at the next one, there's some changes, and we're going to talk about.
I'm pretty sure if we looked at 2011, I'm pretty sure there's a daily Scrum, at least in the table of contents.
Yeah, I thought so too. I remember.
Yeah.
Oh,
when I was
I-
reading Scrum
Well, I
Guides.
could have typed it in wrong. Hold on a minute. That's easily verified. Hold on.
Recount.
Threw me off on this was one of the guides had 5 events. I said, wait a minute, 5 events? And then I realized that the sprint was actually an event.
Yes. And some companies, I won't mention, that they don't include it as an event. Yeah. This is my source. Oh, no, it's not my source. I have to find it, so bear with me. All right. Because I could have wrote this down wrong. I'm a human. I could have made a mistake, so bear with me. The sprint planning. Oh yeah, daily scrum, you're right. Sprint review and sprint retrospective. So I missed the daily sprint. Daily scrum. So there, I made an error.
The Scrum Alliance doesn't recognize the sprint as an event.
Yeah. All right, let me go back. Okay, so this should say daily.
You got 4 of them. You just need to add the 5th one.
All right, cool. So there's 5, and there's always what we're going to talk about, the 5 events later. Now remember, at one time we used to call them ceremonies, and they changed it to events for reasons they came up with. Okay, ready? What are the Scrum artifacts described in Scrum Guide 2011? The artifacts are the same.
MRD.
What?
Oh, funny, Ron, funny.
Oh, only the PRD, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's very few artifacts. Let me know when we're ready, Gopal. Hopefully I didn't make an error on this one. So this is another test. How many mistakes did Jay make? So far I'm up to 1.
All right, we're good.
All right. So product backlog, sprint backlog, and increment. They didn't call it sprint even back then. They call it the sprint to do the sprints, but the artifact that came out of it was an increment of whatever. It doesn't have to be code. Had so many arguments with Agile coaches that every sprint you have to produce in code that has to be, pushed into production. And I said, I don't think so.
Purvi Shah is the winner.
All right, ready? What are the pillars of the Scrum Theory empirical process? These are going to get harder, y'all.
Oh, we already have a right answer.
Oh, wow. I guess that wasn't that hard. All right. Transparency, inspection, and adaptation, right? Those are and they still are, the pillars of Scrum. And I think, they're the pillars of Agile. It doesn't matter what framework you use. I think this has become standard across the board.
Heather typed it in as soon as you finish saying the question.
Okay. Well, let's see. All right. Scrum Guide 21 suggests that the development team total membership should be in the range of X minimum to Y, the largest size of team members. What is that range? What's the X and what's the Y?
Can we do it in plus or minus?
No, it is very specific in the guide. It has a number minimum to a number highest. Did we get a right answer?
Yes.
Cool. It's 3 to 9.
Rob Oliver.
Cool, Oliver. So,
And unfortunately, most people got this wrong. They were like, you know, the big range. They were going up to 10.
Did it change to 5 to 9? There was who came up with 7 plus or minus 2? I've always heard 7 plus or minus 2 is what the Scrum Guide said.
no, that's what us Agile coaches do. We take stuff and we make it our own.
Make it up, okay?
Yeah. And there's probably, Mike Cohn, I probably did some of that too. He did some ranges like that as well as other people. So we all know that once we get above 10 or 11, the level of communication and everything, all the complexity with the teamwork that's required, we get a reverse engineering curve and we get less productivity and everything, right? So it is interesting that not too many teams I've worked with are at the size of 3, but I have. Most teams I've started working with are at the size of 20 or something. We have to figure out how to make them smaller, right? But this is what was in the 2011 one, and it's still out there. And the magic number I hear Ken and Jeff always say is 5 or 7, right? If you want to look for a magic number.
What did the 2010 guide say?
Oh, it's probably the same. I don't think this changed too much over the years. You can go out and look at that website, that link I sent you all. He has all the Scrum Guides there, and you can just click on it. All right, Scrum Guide 2011 indicates that the sprint goal can be a milestone in the product roadmap, true or false. This is obscure.
We have answers.
True. Even back then, they were thinking that a sprint goal should be part of the product roadmap and aligned to it. How many teams do you know actually do sprint goals? I see very few teams do that. And we'll talk about that when we get to the new Scrum Guide. How long has Scrum been practiced? This is not the same question as how old the Scrum Guide is. We have all the answers we need?
Yes, and I think there was somebody who raised their hand. I think it was Heather. Was that to the sprint goal answer you were saying?
Yeah, that was about sprint goals, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about sprint goals and the other new goal that came out of the 2020 guide later. We're going to talk about that in more detail.
1812, Andrew, what is this? 1812.
Yeah, that's probably when the Australian Football League started, somewhere around that time.
Oh, Scrum. Yeah, 25 years. They're celebrating 25 years this year. So Scrum's been around. So if you listen to what Ken and mostly what Jeff says, they were doing Scrum way before they presented Scrum officially, which we'll talk about in a minute, and before they wrote the first Scrum guide. What year was 2 Scrum guides released?
I just want to let everybody know Ming was the winner for the last question.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Great job, Ming. What year was 2 Scrum guides released? And to put that in context, the Scrum Guide 2020 came out after the last one, which was in 2017. But this year, we had 2 released. What year was it? Do we get an answer, Gopal?
Absolutely.
Yep, 2011. And that was an interesting year because there was a lot of stuff going on with Scrum Alliance and with Ken, and there's a lot of stuff going on with Ken and Jeff, and they wanted to make some changes at the end of the year in October for the Scrum Guide, so they made a release. I think after they did that, they decided never to do that again. All right.
Lindy is the winner.
Lindy, good. Excellent. That's a tricky question. Who or what role can cancel a sprint? It's the same in every Scrum Guide.
We have answers.
Wow. Everyone knows this. It's the product owner. In reality, it's more than just one person that makes that decision, right? Okay, the product owner is accountable for doing it, but the team or the stakeholder or the business leader sometimes, or is the technology leader along with the product owner, but the product owner, according to the Scrum Guide, is the only person that can make that decision, that final decision.
David Friedman.
David, great. What is the recommended length of time of sprint planning for a 2-week sprint? How long should you do sprint planning for a 2-week sprint? And it's the same in almost all Scrum Guides, except the current one. They don't mention it.
We have answers.
Excellent. 4 hours.
Again, David Friedman.
Excellent. What year was the Scrum Guide officially presented to the Uppsala conference here in San Francisco? It really wasn't the Scrum Guide. It was Ken and Jeff presenting Scrum to Uppsala.
Ah, that's different.
Yeah, I want to clarify. It wasn't the official Scrum Guide, okay? It was they're presenting their first time ever to a large community. It was the Uppsala community of what Scrum is.
Yeah, we have answers.
Cool. 1995. I remember that. I was there.
We have a new winner, Olaf.
Ah. Who's on the leaderboard? Who is it?
Olaf.
Oh, Olaf. Cool.
There is some feedback about the question being misleading as well.
Well, thank you. I used to write questions for SAFE tests, so there you go. How many people have ever take that SAFE exam for SPC? That's some of those questions are very, I think, confusing. But I didn't mean to be confusing. I probably should not have said Scrum Guide. I can remember this because I was there, I saw it, and at the time I was working for IBM, and to be honest with you, I didn't think much of it because we were already doing XP and other stuff. But you know, it's one of those things you look in hindsight, going like, "Hey, I should have, you know, paid more attention to it." All right. What are the characteristics of a Scrum team as described in the Scrum Guide 2014?
You got to get all of them.
Yes, this will take some typing. Or whoever gets the closest to all of them. This is going to take some typing. I mean, you can shorthand it, but they were very specific in Scrum Guide 2014 of what they wanted the Scrum team to exude as far as behavioral or characteristics of the Scrum team. And a lot of, I'll just give you a hint. We say that all the time now as Agile coaches and everything of what a team needs to be. We say these words all the time.
So while people are answering, I looked up the 2010 Scrum Guide, and it's 7 ± 2 is the recommended team size.
Well, I'll pull it up again. I'll highlight the text that I took it from in the Scrum Guide.
You pulled it from 2011, but 2010 it says 7 ± 2.
Oh, you're saying 2010 it was 7 ± 2. Then they changed it in 2011. So there you go. There's an example of a change they made. Some of the changes were, like, in my opinion, innocuous. We're going to talk about some of the changes in Scrum Guide 2020 that I consider more important. But to your point, that's kind of on the same, except they're just, you know, making the more specific numbers, if you will, and the following Scrum Guide, which I think they kind of stuck with the rest of them until this one, is the 3 to 9. Did we get answers yet, Gopal? This is a
yes, we got answers. And Michael, you cannot speak, or are you just making a joke?
Is it a joke? If it's a joke, share it.
Oh, you raised your hand several times. I am sorry, Michael. Go ahead. Michael.
Gonna talk?
You want to say something? Please recheck the who can cancel the answer.
Who can cancel the answer?
Michael, you can unmute yourself and talk. You don't have to type. It's a small group.
Yeah, but this is the answer. We say this all the time. Now, pay attention to self-organizing. This is going to change a little bit. Cross-functional, multidisciplinary, we say that all the time. No titles. That was a big thing at one time. And it still is, I think. But that's sensitive. No sub-teams. And I think we all agree with that. We have we'll talk later about feature teams versus component teams. And then specialized skills and areas of focus for each team member. So that's what was in the guide. And they were trying to be very specific of what a Scrum team is. And this is their characteristics.
And we have Heather who got the closest answer to this one.
Cool.
And Michael and Jay, if you can lower Michael's hand, I don't know if you can do that. Maybe that's what he was asking.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I can do that either. Let me look.
There you go.
All right, cool. All right. So, wow, this is not going away for me. Hold on a minute. What? I can't read this. All right. There we go. All right. What are the daily stand-up questions as described in Scrum Guide 2014? Now, I want to warn everybody that there's a specific term or word that's used in these daily stand-up questions that most people do not use or consider because it's been morphed over the years.
Is it important?
Yeah, it's very important, especially when we talk about Scrum Guide 2020. And these questions are no longer, they're not in Scrum Guide 2020, and a lot of high-performing Scrum teams don't even ask these questions, okay? But it was in the Scrum Guide 2014.
Yeah, I was glad to see that removed from the Scrum Guide.
Yes, it's gone from 2020 Scrum Guide.
I can't remember the last time I actually had a team that used those questions.
I'm not sure I've seen a team that hasn't used them.
We have answers.
Yeah, you got answers. All right. So I want to point out something to you all here. So what did I did yesterday? What did I do today? And is there any impediments? That's what I hear all the time. But notice what they were saying here, and they're going to really highlight this a lot during Scrum Guide 2020. It's to meet the Scrum sprint goal. Okay. It's not about, what did I do yesterday on this story? What did you do to meet the sprint goal?
Oh, so I want to add those other 5 words in there to help the development team. I think those are equally important to meeting the sprint goal.
Yeah.
Instead of being the silo of what did I do and what am I going to do? What am I going to do to help the team?
Right. So this is an example of what happens when something like this goes out to millions of people in the world. Over time, it gets morphed and shortened, right? And it loses its intent. This is common in everything human beings do, in my opinion. Who won this one?
So, if we are going with the full version, obviously Lindy is the one who won. She had the complete version of these 3 questions. But Courtney just did the shortened version about a few seconds before Lindy. So,
well, I would go with the full version because the sprint goal, the development team, those things are the important things, in my opinion, that we lost touch with over the years. And that's why these questions become meaningless and valueless over time, right? And it morphs into other things, right? But you won't see these in Scrum Guide 2020 at all, okay? What are the commitments for each Scrum artifact? Now we're in Scrum Guide 2020. Okay, so if you haven't read 2020, you won't know this, but.
And again, there is more than one.
Yes.
right, we have a lot of answers.
Wow, is any of them correct?
Yes.
All right, cool. So what's new, which we'll talk more about in Scrum Guide 2020, is the product goal. So they spend more attention on the product backlog and the product as a whole, and coming up with a product goal. The sprint backlog, still we're measuring the outcome or the ability of doing sprint backlog based on the sprint goal. And then notice here, they call it an increment, okay? And the increment is then aligned to the definition of done.
Just like last time, we have two. Purvi gave the answer of product goal, sprint goal, definition of done, but Lindy had both the product backlog equal to product goal, sprint backlog is sprint goal, and increment is definition of done.
Excellent.
So I am saying let's make this two winners this time.
Okay, cool. All right, the last question. What is the product goal in Scrum Guide 2020? And they defined it. You don't have to do the exact wording, but I'm going to have the exact wording as the answer, but they defined it.
We have answers.
Cool. All right. So they define the product goal as a long-term objective for the Scrum team. They must fulfill or abandon the objective for taking on the next whatever. So a product is a vehicle to deliver value. It has a clear boundary, known stakeholders, well-defined users or customers. A product could be a service, a physical product, or something more abstract. That is the most generalized definition of a product I've ever seen. But that's what's in the new Scrum Guide 2020. So I'm going to let Gopal kind of tally all this up and find out the winner. And what I'm thinking of doing is sending some books. Once we get who the winner is, and maybe first runner-up, if you can send me your address, I'll ship some books to you. I have choices that I'll send you all an email. So I need two things: one, your email; one, your address, and then I'll ship the books to you. And I have some choices for you. I have some books here that are aligned with our profession. I have some, Scrum books, and I have some less books, and I have a whole bunch of books. And then I have the new Barack Obama book too. I have 2 copies of that if anyone wants that. But I'll provide a list of options to the winner and the first runner-up, and you can select via email, and then I'll ship it to you.
All right, I have the tally.
Cool.
So you're going to send quite a number of books here based on this. So we have both Heather and Lindy. They got 4 questions right each.
Cool.
And then we have David Friedman, Doug, and Purvi. They had 3 questions right each.
Excellent. So
thank you for playing.
Yeah, thank everyone for playing. Just send me your email, and my email's on the meetup, or I can just, before we leave, I'll text it to everyone in the chat. Just send me your email and we'll communicate. I'll get your address and then I'll give you some options, some books to choose from. I have an extensive library, so I'll put a list out there for everyone. And then you'll get the books hopefully before Christmas, but I'm pretty sure I can't guarantee it at this juncture. But thank you for playing. Hopefully that was interesting and provided some value. So what I would like to turn to now is Scrum Guide 2020 changes. So I'm going to get out of this. All right. All right. That's our next guest, Kevin.
You're still sharing the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, good. So I'm going to share something else in a minute. So hold on. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so this is the new Scrum Guide. All right, November 2020, all cool. And like I said, they've had some meetings or presentations on this. Jeff and Ken together with Scrum Inc. and Scrum Org did the same thing. Boston, because Ken lives there. Jeff lives there, has done it. And they've talked about it. So I'm going to give you my interpretation of this and what's new and different. And then I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open the mic. It's open mic for you all to talk and provide what your point of view is and what you think, right? So one of the major thing I'm going to talk about is the Scrum Team. The name changes here, what the Scrum Masters wording and stuff to do. The Scrum events hasn't changed that much. The Scrum Artifact's a huge change here with the product backlog and the product goal and how that relates to the sprint goal and the increment and definition of done. So those are kind of the major changes. So when I look at this, they're getting more product organized. So as we all know, the product and the product discipline has grown over the years. It's become a career. It's become its own world. Mind the product school here in San Francisco, product design teams. It's a profession and a career that's significant now and has grown over the years. And remember, this product's been around since Procter & Gamble back in the 60s and stuff, but it's really taken on its own during the Agile revolution and this notion of this product leadership and product owners. So the Scrum definition has not changed that much. Scrum theory has not changed that much. It's still transparency, inspection, adaptation. They did add a little bit. They paid kudos to the Scrum values, which is commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. I spend a lot of time on courage when I talk to people when it comes to Scrum. So that hasn't changed much. The Scrum team hasn't changed much. It's still the Scrum Master, product owner, and the developers. So this is a change in the sense of terminology and the intent here. was that it's not the development team, it's not the team, it's that these people are the team. The developers, the product owner, and the Scrum Master, all these people are the team. So that they're trying to have some clarification around that. And notice here that they changed it. It didn't say 3 to 9 or any of that stuff. Simply work within a sprint, typically 10 or fewer people. So it's not just 3 to 9 or 2 plus 7 plus, it's 10 or fewer people now. Okay. It's a little bit more generic, I guess.
And that also includes the Scrum Master and the product owner now.
Yes. Yes. So that's where they're going there. And 10 and 11 is the magic number when you look at the data out there on how they determine the communication complexity of human beings working together. We do see science out there that once you go over 10, it's much more difficult. Developers. So it's not the team, it's not the development team or anything like that anymore. It's the developers. And notice that the order, developers, product owner, and Scrum Master that they put in this order. So notice here that they're talking about the developers, that need to have the skills, to create the plan, the sprint blackout. There's nothing in here that says they have to be cross-functional or multidisciplinary. I think at this point in time, that's assumed. The product owner, notice here that the product owner has some specific things they got to do around the product goal. See, they have to develop and explicitly communicate the product goal. Now, in some companies, that's called the vision, the product vision. And then if you use OKRs or anything like that, you'll have objectives and key results that reach a goal. But that's just a technique. Then you still have PBIs, product backlog items, and they still have to order it. Notice they have to order it, not prioritize it. And they have to ensure it's transparent, visible, and understood. That's what they said before. Okay. The Scrum Master, it's a little different than in the past ones. They're saying here the Scrum Master is accountable for Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. They have everyone understand it. The Scrum Master is accountable for Scrum team effectiveness. That's new. Okay. And the Scrum Masters are true leaders that serve the team in larger organizations. So now this is prior Scrum Guides too. The Scrum Master, helps the team do these things. They simplified it. The Scrum Master helps the product owner do these things. They simplified. It's basically the same. The Scrum Master serves the organization doing these things. Not much difference from the other ones. Okay, Scrum events. Then notice here, to your point, Ron, they talk about the sprint. But when they talk about definition of done, it's talking about the increment that comes out of the sprint. Not to confuse you. So they're fixed length, which that hasn't changed. It's necessary to obtain the product goal. You do all those events during the sprint. Notice here, no changes are made that would endanger the sprint. And that's similar to what they've said before. Quality doesn't decrease. It's refined. Scope is defined. Negotiation is similar. Most of this is similar. They don't get into a lot of details. In the first Scrum Guide and everything, they talked about measurements and burn down and all that stuff. They don't talk about that at all. They're more generic here. Like the horizon is not too long to become invalid. Okay. I have not noticed anywhere, unless I missed it, what, sprint length should not be over 4 weeks. I haven't seen that. So notice here, various practices, this like burn down, burn ups, and cumulative flow. See this? Cumulative flow. Okay, that's from Lean. That's measuring throughput and flow. Okay. That, so, you know, I don't know if y'all know this, like velocity, notice velocity is not mentioned here. I'm not a fan of velocity, but a lot of people use it. Velocity, burn down and burn ups are looking at metrics in the past. Okay, which is good. Cumulative flow is looking at projected, what's going on now and what can happen tomorrow. It's a huge difference. All right. Sprint planning, that hasn't changed much. You know, you lay out the sprint, they have topic 1 and topic 2. They've talked about that before. Notice here they have topic 3, which is kind of new for this one. They go a little bit more detail about the done. So that's basically the same except for topic 3. The sprint goal is still here. You know, you got to have a sprint goal for the sprint. Notice here it says sprint planning is time boxed to a maximum of 8 hours for a 1-month sprint. Okay. Doesn't have, if it's a 2-week sprint, it's 4 hours. They still do the daily scrum, right? Notice here there's no mention of the 3 questions. That's gone. Okay. And it's basically, it's 15 minutes is still there, right? But basically they leave it up to the developers to select whatever structures and technique they want. But notice it's the developers, not the product owner. It's not the Scrum Master. Sprint review. I think everyone on the phone knows that originally the sprint review is not just a demo. They do a lot of inspect and adaptation. They look at the metrics. They talk about what the review of the team and the sprint goal. Now they would also talk about the product goal. Notice here it says the Scrum team and the stakeholders review. Okay, I've had arguments with lots of people that says, "Oh, when we do the sprint goal in retrospective, it's only the core team. Other people outside the core team cannot come in." And I said, "Why? Why wouldn't you want them to hear what they think and say and share, especially your stakeholders or end users, if you can, right?" So again, they highlighted that. Notice here it says the sprint review is the second to the last event of the sprint. Guess what the last event is? It's the sprint retrospective. So again, this is still the team inspects how they can do better, right? To improve their effectiveness. Again, here on the Scrum artifacts, they do still have the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. And each one of those are determined whether you meet the product goal or you meet the sprint goal or you meet the definition of done. So what they're saying here in my interpretation is it's not necessarily about meeting X number of story point commitments or stories done or so forth. No, you'll see nothing in here about story points. It's you know, did you reach your goal for the product goal or that increment? Did you reach your sprint goal, right? So it's very highlighted there. On the product backlog, there's much changes. They simplified it. They did not put a lot of detail in there. But they did say here that developers basically are responsible for the sizing, which has always been the case. But there's so many different sizing techniques you can use out there depending upon the maturity of the team. They kind of let it at that, okay, and determining the trade-offs. So again, here's the product goal and the commitment, which that was one of my questions.
I just want to notice that it does not say that the tech lead is responsible for sizing.
No.
The manager is not responsible for sizing.
No.
The product owner is not responsible for sizing. The
No.
developers are responsible for sizing.
Correct.
And that's always been the case. What's interesting about it is I actually watched a video 2 weeks ago and I was kind of bothered by it because somebody was real happy that the word estimate was removed out of it. And it really wasn't. It's still the sizing.
Mhm.
And it doesn't change the fact that you are still going to do some type of sizing or some type of estimate.
Mhm.
It was almost like they were happy that you didn't have to do estimates, and it's almost like they misinterpreted it.
Well, there are subtle differences between the words estimate, size,
Yeah.
and forecasting. XP, I think XP uses the word forecasting. Somebody does.
Well, there is a whole thing beyond estimating out there and beyond budgeting. Mhm. So I think they're careful here. They didn't want to use the word estimating because it's loaded. I don't know if sizing is any less loaded, right? But it is some form of determining the complexity or size of the effort that we have to do, right, and commit.
Well, it could be the sizes of the stories. It's not specific.
Right.
And the sizes of stories are knowing that is very valuable to product owners.
Mhm.
In order to know that, for example, teleportation might take forever and it's probably a bad idea to put at the top of the backlog.
Right. But they do say product backlog refinement is the act of breaking down backlog and so forth. I mean, they don't go into a lot of details like they did on the first two Scrum guides of how, how to do that, and backlog grooming and all that stuff, right?
That's a good thing. That way you're not as prescriptive. Let the teams figure out how they want to do it best.
Exactly. And some teams out there in the world has figured out some unique ways of doing this, right? And then we have the sprint backlog. Doesn't change too much. It's the stuff you pick from the product backlog, and it's the stuff the developers plan to commit to. But what you're saying here is, notice it's a real-time picture of the work that has to be accomplished to achieve the sprint goal. So they're big on, you need to define the sprint goal and it has to be visible to everyone. And that's what you're going to be trying to attain. Same thing with the product goal, right? When they talk about the sprint goal here.
And notice the sprint backlog, the sprint backlog is updated throughout the sprint as more.
Yes.
So it's not sacrosanct.
Right.
So David, the reason I was throwing in the developers do the sizing is not because the Scrum Guide hasn't always said that, but because so many teams don't do that. And ditto here.
Exactly. So this, again, underscores that it is the developer's responsibility and accountability to figure out what they can do and how they can do it during that time frame.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the way we've been working.
And it says here, the sprint goal is created during sprint planning. Okay, so you agreed to it during that event, right? And then during the daily stand-ups and so forth, that's what they're recommending, that we're always, here's a sprint goal, where are we at? Notice here that they talk about increment more. So it's a stepping stone to the product goal. So if I break down the product goal, that's the iterations and increments that they're talking about to a release. Okay, so if I look at a release plan, from a product perspective, it's how I'm breaking down. I take these terms, these epics and features, that then relates to a product goal, then that relates to user stories, right? So for each increment, basically, what are we delivering to achieve pieces or parts of the product goal? So there's multiple increments can be created, may be created within a sprint. You gotta think about that. That's a little odd. and this is really important, work cannot be considered part of the increment unless it meets the definition done, which we always say. The story's not done if you didn't meet the DOD, it goes back into the backlog. And this is what they went to. This is in 2021, they're getting more formal about what a definition of done is. So in the beginning in 2010, and large scale Scrum is very popular about this, they talked about undone, the undones of stuff and where they go. And you have an undone list that you have to keep track of or getting done. And some organizations actually have a team. All they do is the undone work, believe it or not. So again, they're doubling down on this notion that the definition of done is very important. And you have to define it and you have to track it. And notice here it says, if a definition done for an increment is part of the standards of the organization, all Scrum teams must follow it as a minimum. So if you had a working agreement, a team of teams or something, and everyone came up with a common definition of done across multiple teams, everyone should follow it. I like this. The developers are required to conform to the definition of done. Well, they create it, and they maintain it and modify it. So, they're basically they're creating their own soup to cook it.
Does it actually say, wait, does it actually say here that the developers create the definition of done?
No, it doesn't say that, but they do.
So I believe. Go on.
Go ahead, Rob.
I find this confusing because if you're doing cross teams, a sort of generic definition of done, to me, that's not an increment. An increment sounds like it's specific to, say, a Scrum Teams sprint, right? So it's confusing to have both for the team and then across the organization to me, for definition.
Yeah, yeah. So I think they're spreading their wings here.
How I look at it is, in larger organizations, they may set a set of standards that they expect every team to align with. And and I look at it as it's like object-oriented programming. The team needs to inherit that and then maybe add its own methods for its own increment.
It could be. I mean, they leave it open. I think they're just making a statement here that if you have teams of teams or some kind of organizational level where that group of people came up with a standard definition of done they would like everyone to follow, then you can do that. And that's pretty common in frameworks like LESS, where we have multiple teams using one product backlog, right? So you'd want to have a collective definition of done for those teams, because we're all releasing into the same code base and releasing into production, right? Or multiple.
I get that, but I just don't see the specification for an increment. That's kind of new to me. It's like it implies that it could change from increment to increment too.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So after you're done with the increment, they don't talk about this in here, but that's a perfect time to do the review of your working agreement, definition of done. Notice in here that they've never ever talked about definition of ready for a user story. But that's becoming common out there right now with a lot of companies, right? So a lot of things that Scrum talks here is not the end all. A lot of organizations and teams have developed, additional practices and techniques beyond this.
Yeah, what's interesting at Wells Fargo with our definition of done is we actually have on Gateway 3 types of teams. One type of team develops APIs, and we did develop a common definition for the API teams. But there's other teams, for example, we have one piece, which is the dev portal, and our definition of done is different because it is different type of work. And I guess this makes sense in the sense that if your increment becomes different type of work, your definition of done may change because of that.
Yes, I think the problem ensues when my definition of done across multiple teams impacts how I have to do the merge of my code and the testing of my code so I can deploy it. So if this team's definition of done is not completing certain things, and my definition of done is more complete and running things through, Sonar and everything else and coverage, and it has to be this level of testing, 3 levels of testing. This people only have to do unit testing. Okay, and I have to merge the code and then deploy it and do end-to-end testing. That's going to be a problem. You follow me? Because one team's definition of done is not at the same level as the other team's definition of done. Does that make sense? Yeah, no answer. So I confused people.
One thing that I noticed about this is if they're devaluing things like estimation and velocity, this almost looks more like an outcome versus output statement. In other words, we're all going to know what done looks like, however you come to that conclusion or however you estimate that at the beginning. So it's almost like an operating agreement too. Again, we're going to trust you that we're going to give you this chunk of work and you're going to deliver it on time. However you choose to break that up or define those, I guess those chunks of time that it's going to take to actually, complete it. So it's interesting that, one thing disappears and another thing seems to be almost a stronger statement maybe.
So you can go to, if you go to scruminc.com, you can go there and you can listen to Ken and Jeff and others talk, but they do mention that notion of outcome based. So what they're trying to do here from their own words is to make this more outcome based. That's why they came up with product goals, sprint goals, and definition done. They want people to focus on the outcomes and how you can make significant changes on delivering outcomes. Now they didn't, of course, they don't go to OKRs or any of that stuff or outcome-based mapping and all that junk, but they did say that it's more outcome oriented.
Starting to make an appearance where I'm at, because we've brought in people from places like Google who are keen on OKRs and that type of output or outcome versus output type thinking. There's a big push just on product thinking, which is nice because, in a company that really never had a definition of products, they're starting to think about it in that sense, although we still call them services. But yeah, the whole revolving around the products and the developers is an interesting twist. And I think the empowerment of blameworthiness that they're putting on the Scrum Master. In other words, you're responsible for the team's ultimate, not success, but functionality, I guess.
Yeah, so that was the other big change here. They really doubled down on the Scrum Master's responsibility. Basically, if you think about it, the Scrum Master is an Agile coach and a Scrum Master.
Yeah.
Okay. They really doubled down on their power, if you will. So this is what a lot of people are talking about right now is the importance of the Scrum Master role. And what this new Scrum Guide is saying, that basically this person is responsible for the health of the Scrum team, but they're also responsible to helping the health of the product owner and the health of the organization to move to an Agile organization.
What do we,
I can,
On the
what do we
Scrum,
think of the fact that there are so many teams that say we're doing Scrum that do not have Scrum Masters? Or so they have a role called Scrum Master that a developer or a tester puts on once in a while.
yeah, or the engineering manager doubles up as a Scrum Master and it doesn't work.
Right.
I can tell you from, what I have seen, the Scrum Master, this definition is getting closer to what I see a Scrum Master can deliver value. And I fully support it. In fact, it's not going far enough, if you ask me. It needs to be more. And that's the only way the Scrum Master can stay a couple of steps ahead and be a true servant leader for the organization and for the team. And that includes the product, understanding the product and helping out with the product role, as well as understanding the program side and the portfolio side and the business side. So I think it's a good start in terms of the evolution of the Scrum Master.
It just seems like they're making direct accountability, which I've never heard before.
Yeah.
and at the same time, some of the wording I do like there. One of the ones I like is causing the removal of impediments. And I think I like the word causing because we're going to help them to solve it. But a lot of times the challenge with the team, and I've had it with my teams, is that they think I'm going to remove the impediment, but they really need to do the work. So I'm going to help cause the removal of that impediment, but it doesn't mean I'm going to remove it for them. So I feel there's subtlety in that wording, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, that's important. A lot of people have talked about that. And basically, when I read this, we used to have a phrase back in the old days that this is, we called them the bulldog. This is the person that facilitates and gets things done, works through everybody, and they're just bulldogging everything. That's what we used to call it back in the day. But yeah, they're being much more specific of what the Scrum Master does. I think the product owner side, they're being less specific. They're accountable for the product and they're accountable for the product backlog management here, right? And they can delegate responsibility. So hello, business analysts, BAs, they're product owners and Scrum. And so they talk about that, but what they don't talk about yet here is the product discovery and product innovation side of the house and doing that work, right? So here they're still focused on delivery.
So even in the definition of the Scrum, in the earlier guide 2017, they didn't talk anything about the Scrum Master. But now if you scroll way back up in the definition of Scrum, they said in a nutshell, a Scrum Master is required. So that wasn't there before.
Yes, that's very important. Right here. So it's here somewhere.
Yeah, the third line.
All right, cool. So they're very, I guess, being as specific as possible. That says, you can't do Scrum unless you have a Scrum Master, and it has to be a real Scrum Master. It's a real role in the company. It's an HR role. All right, so any questions around that? So
I think
the
there was a comment earlier about how few teams have sprint goals.
Yeah, sprint goals have gone out of my experience, gone out of favor years ago.
Totally in here. What does that mean?
Well, just people don't do it. And that not only they do not do it, they don't understand it or how to do it. And that's because people that came in and trained people on how to do Scrum didn't know it, and they didn't train people well. Hence, in my opinion, it's gone off the rails. And it's going to be the same issue with the product goal. Although we have good, very good product leaders out there in the world right now, and they talk about product vision and product roadmaps and goals and so forth. So that maybe that won't, lose its significance. But I don't know. I open up to everyone on the call. I mean, are you all developing sprint goals? And it's not get all the stories done. That's not a sprint goal.
We're good at naming them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we are, but we're not doing it right. The product owner is trying to define the sprint goal without the team, and you need to have the team involved with that.
Yeah, it's what is it, Ron? It's a team sport, right?
Yeah. What was Heather about to say?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say, I do a sprint goal because I took a workshop with for PSM2 training, and our instructor loved sprint goals. So like her whole 2-day workshop was about sprint goals. So.
Great.
Yeah, I've advised teams to set sprint goals. It's part of my coaching. So it's in practice for the teams I work with.
Great.
It can be challenged though. If you have a bunch, it's for an increment. It can be challenging though for a product owner and even a team advising if there's a bunch of seemingly unrelated stories. So it can be kind of a challenge, but nonetheless, I make sure that they try to practice that.
Yeah, we used to do sprint goals. We used to put them on the wall. So we'd have stuff on the wall. Then we have a big thing, a sprint goal for this sprint. And sometimes our sprint goal was over 2 or 3 sprints, but it'd be like, our sprint goal is to get, for a policy admin system, get the initial customer identification done over the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks, right? And it was a lot of work, right? And we would break out the features and stories to it, but that was our sprint goal, that was all of our focus, right? That was a major functionality that we wanted to get out to the UAT or wherever, right? That's kind of what we did. We kind of came up with like, okay, what do we want to get done from an outcome base that will make a difference to the application that we're building, right? And that's kind of how we did it. And I quite frankly, I don't see a lot of that done anymore. So I'm happy to hear that you all are doing that. Okay, so I'm going to flip over and kind of go through a couple things and open it up for any more conversation anyone wants to have over Scrum and Scrum Guide. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So there's 2 things I want to talk about before we get to the open discussion. One, I'll send this deck out, but there's this thing called the Agile 20 Reflect Festival. I encourage everyone to join. This is going to be the first time ever we've done this, but it's a global event where we're hooking up meetups and events across the world. So we have ambassadors in almost every country of the world. There's a lot of events going on. We're trying to develop the North America ones. That's going to be for the February only, for February 21. And we're going to store all of them in Zoom up. There'll be hundreds of them that you can see later. You can speak, you can submit to speak, you can host an event, or you can just participate and learn. So it's kind of interesting for me to find out what Africa is doing and India and China and everything when it comes to Agile and Agile Manifesto and Scrum. So we're celebrating Agile Manifesto, which is 20 years old. Okay, and when we're sharing what everyone is doing in this world. A lot of great speakers, a lot of famous or infamous Agile leaders are going to participate. So join that if you can. I'm not going to go through this, but it'll be in the deck. So as we all know, there's a lot of stuff we got to do beyond Scrum. And this just lists the Agile ecosystem and some stuff we've talked about in the past. I'm not going to go through it all. And then I will just want to thank everyone. And if you have any ideas, to send it to us, go to Meetup and just send us a note of what you would like to hear or speak to, or whom you would like to hear. And we'll try our best to get those people or get that subject topic on a timeline. So in February, we're probably going to have several events to join this Agile 20 festival. So if you have any ideas, please go to that link and put them in. So we got 15 minutes. So I now will open it up to any conversation or anything anyone wants to talk about related to Scrum Guide or Scrum or whatever.
Jay, I had something.
All right.
This is Chris. So talking about the 2020 Scrum Guide and where it mentions a Scrum Master being accountable for the team's effectiveness. So the bit about that makes me a little bit nervous is it doesn't define what an effective team is. And if companies that we know have this belief about the output of the team, so we're talking about, did you deliver all the stories that you commit to the sprint? And, you know, is your velocity increasing over time? We know that leadership in companies still look at those metrics. So I'm a Scrum Master. The stand-up call, is that going to turn into a status meeting? And am I going to be facilitating or like chairing these meetings? Because it makes me feel like if you're accountable for the output, then are you expected to crack the whip? Which I don't think by any means that that's what they're getting at here. But then again, when we talk about maybe the outcomes that the team deliver, and if the product owner is putting out really terrible features because they haven't done the research, am I accountable for their effectiveness too? I'm just saying that it's interesting that it could be taken in a different way, and I just wonder what other people think about that. Because I want to be a neutral Scrum Master and facilitate and motivate. I don't want that to go away.
I'll let other people talk, but I'll tell you what we generally do. The product owner is responsible for the outcome. They need to define the outcome. They need to be held accountable for it. They're responsible for it, period. The Scrum Master there is to facilitate the teams to be as high performing as possible and help them grow and do better, right? But it should be measured on outcomes and not outputs. We use the outputs as data to help us do better so that we can achieve the outcomes. So that's my 2 cents. Anyone else?
Yeah, I guess my thoughts are it puts a little more teeth into the Scrum Master role. But if you're effective, you don't necessarily need to change. I mean, basically, but you do need to be the one to call things out at times. I mean, I won't lie. One time I was in a meeting with some of our leaders and I said our product owner was a blocker since he wasn't getting stories to the team. And you have to be honest about it and you have to sometimes be blunt. And I think sometimes you try to walk away from it, but I think now the Scrum Master does have to do those things. They have to make sure that they are revealing these things and making sure you find ways to improve. And like I said, you're not going to do the work for the team. And that's why when I look at some of the stuff, like the causing the removal of impediments, you're going to wind up working with the team and get them to do the right thing.
And I can break this down in a couple of pieces, right? One is, if we look at a company or an organizational point of view, right? Being agile or the agile mindset is all about making sure that everybody in the organization focuses on the outcome of the organization or the company. So that includes the Scrum Master, and it doesn't exclude the Scrum Master. If they're not, then we don't have the entire organization having the mindset. The second point of view is just within the team itself. If the team has certain points of view about the outcome and they're different, the Scrum Master needs to be in a place where they might be able to ask questions and probing questions and figure out a optimal solution or work with the team to get to an optimal solution. So that again puts the Scrum Master with the Scrum Master need to be armed with more than just facilitating the team. So that's where I usually lean towards when I look at a Scrum Master. They definitely need to be more focused from an organization perspective and from a team perspective to bring the best out of the team and the organization.
Yeah, I've always said that there's two roles that are the most difficult roles. One of them is the product owner, because they have to live in product discovery and product delivery. They have to be the voice of the customer. They have to determine the work coming into the team and kind of prioritize it. A lot of work. The other one is the Scrum Master. To me, the Scrum Master is a very difficult position, because you got to be a psychologist, a cultural anthropologist, a manager to some extent. So it's, to me, those are the two. If you take Scrum and Agile in general, those two jobs are the keystone of making Agile successful, and it's hard, right? And facilitation and negotiation, having the help of the team, having one-on-one personal conversations with people, being able to determine if things go off or someone's having a problem and working with them, having conversations with senior management or managers who are causing problems, right? All those things makes it a difficult job, right? That's why sometimes it's not easy for a project manager to just assume a Scrum Master's role, right? Because of the emotional mental model that has to change, right? So when I read this, and a lot of people think this way out there, that there is no such thing as an Agile coach. A Scrum Master is an Agile coach. And there's a lot of people that think that way. And it's just a matter of exposure and experience over time that helps you get the skills and capabilities that allow you to do more and more and work with more and more people, more complexity. So I do like that the Scrum Guide 2020 is kind of doubling down on the role of the Scrum Master to take ownership of all that. And maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too much. And that's why we have communities of practice of Scrum Masters and product owners. Because if you think about it, it can be overwhelming for one person to have all this, right? So we have to, swarm and share all that and get help from everybody. So that's kind of what I've noticed.
Just wait till someone gets the bright idea of having all of the developers report to the Scrum Masters.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that's something I definitely don't like. And one thing that I noticed in my role as Scrum Master is I've been able to build a rapport with the team, and the team's not afraid to come to me if they see something wrong. Now, I've had several times where people will come to me and say, hey, we're violating our rules of definition of done, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. And they feel at times the management isn't listening to them. And I guess they feel comfortable enough coming to me, and that's a good thing. Because that way then I can escalate those items if they need to be escalated.
Right. And just to make fun of Andrew, you know, I don't know if they changed this, but there's a company here in San Francisco called Salesforce, and they have these groups, they're called clouds. And the engineer leader was the Scrum Master for all their teams, and they're their manager. I said, I don't think that's going to work, you all, because you know, there's just a lot of problems with that. Okay, but they say it works fine. So I'm just so to Andrew's point, we try not to have the Scrum Masters being the, you know, the hiring and firing manager for the team.
Well, maybe Slack will change that. Who knows?
That's right.
So they want their subsidiaries to be that way. I've just started coaching for a subsidiary of Salesforce, and they're already organized that way with managers as Scrum Masters.
I know, and they think it's they keep telling me that they don't have any problems, and I've been at some of these events and stuff. Let me tell you, I haven't been to all of them. I'm sure I've got a small snippet, and I don't have sufficient information or knowledge, but I could tell a difference that people are not just as open in the retrospective and the sprint review with the Scrum Master there.
No safe harbor.
Nope. Okay. Go ahead.
Jay, I was going to say, you know, totally, you know, agree, and we're all on board in the terms of like the effectiveness, but I still do worry that it might be interpreted the wrong way by some companies, you know, somewhere, just like commitment in the sprint planning was, you know, effectiveness of the team, I think, is open to interpretation, and they could start to put metrics in there that are going to change the behaviors, but let's hope that, you know, that doesn't happen.
Well, hopefully we're holding enough as Scrum Masters to push that in the right direction. I know that's something that's come up on my teams. I mean, one item that was very big in my group, and which I pushed back on, was retrospectives. We don't publish retrospectives for people to see. We'll expose those pieces that need to be seen, but the retrospective should be private to the team, because they want to have that safe place and they want to feel protected.
Well, the ideal situation, which not every organization is there yet, is that we can be completely transparent with everybody. I mean, we can, you know, air our dirty laundry, and we're not going to get punished for it, right? We're going to get the respect and dignity we deserve and the support we deserve from leadership to solve our problems, right? And give us freedom and autonomy to do that, right? But we have, as we all know, not every company and organization has that culture that allows that to happen and that psychological safety. So I look at Scrum Masters and product owners and Agile coaches as the people, the catalyst to help change. You know, to me, organization design equals culture, right? It drives cultural change. So if an organization starts changing their organization and team structure where they have Scrum Masters, they have roles of responsibility for Scrum Masters, they have product owners, they have a development team that are dedicated people to the product or the product area, right? And they measure outcomes and they have flow of work coming in, then that helps to those points that you all brought up to start seeing that cultural change, because we've changed the organizational structure and the HR structure and how people are rewarded and awarded and paid and so forth based on outcomes and based on what the team does. And of course, major contributors, but it's a journey, and I share Chris's and other people's concern. But I think it's up to us as visionaries, if you will, to help our organization to move along this journey. and that's our lot in life. I think it's exciting and fun, but I think that is our responsibility as Scrum Masters or Agile leaders. All right, cool. We're out of time. I want to thank everyone for attending. Great conversation. We're going to have more sessions and continuing more sessions. If you have any ideas or anything, send them to us or me, and we'll try to get stuff scheduled. Send me, if you want, send me an email, your name and address. And this is my email. I'm going to type it into the chat right now. In case I'm going to type in my Emphabit one, because that's the one I use a lot instead of my Matrix one. Okay, and I'll send it out to the meeting to the meetup meeting as well, so that everyone gets it, because some people left already. Okay, so there we go. There we go. All right, so that's my email, Gervais@emphabitagile.com. Just send me your information. I'll send it out to the meetup as well, and I'll send the deck out to the meetup as well as the Zoom recording. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next year. Bye.
Thank you all for playing the Scrum Guide game.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great meetup. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Fun.
Bye.